Brothers and sisters, the NFPA publishes over 300 codes and standards. NFPA standards define our staffing levels, training requirements, our medical physicals, our apparatus, our equipment, our uniforms, and of course, our protective gear, just to name a few. These standards outline how many of these issues in the fire service are addressed. The IAFF needs you to participate so our voices can be heard on these critical issues. The following video will outline the process and how to be involved with the NFPA committee. See you there and be safe.
Just about everything we've learned from experience, from near misses, like Hunter Clare and his experience with energy storage systems. On the right side of the screen, you see the SCBA face piece lens. I believe that was Mark Falkenhand from Baltimore County area. And many other incidents, right, where this is why standards matter. And so we do need to be involved in the process. So the first thing you should know is how do you access the standards? Right, so accessing the standards, you basically have 4 ways we can do it. The first thing, probably the easiest thing you can do is go online, nfpa.org / and the standard number you're looking for. So in the case of like energy storage, you might look at 855, and it'll take you to a page called the Doc Info page, and I'll show you what all these look like. That's free access. You can look at the standard completely online. It's in real time, so whatever changes have happened during the cycle, you'll be able to see. The next way is the National Fire Code Subscription Service. This is kind of historically the way that you could download PDFs. You can't download PDFs anymore, but you can look at a PDF of the document online there. That costs some money to subscribe to that. And then there's NFPA Link, which is the newest way you can access it, and that's a really cool way to do it. And I'll kind of go through that as well. And then obviously old school print edition for sale. You can buy. Tom likes that. You can buy a standard. You have a book mailed to you. Just does not update automatically. We'll get paper that does that, I'm sure, soon, but it's not there yet. So the Doc Info page. So this is what it looks like. Again, this is nfpa.org / and the number. It's going to take you to a page that looks like this. If you look here on the bottom, you've got some tabs. The current and prior editions, the next edition, and the technical committee. That'll take you information about the document, what the next edition is, and you can look at it there, and you can look at where it is in the development process, and we'll look at that a little later. And you can even look at who's on the technical committee and who they're representing. This is what that looks like, the free access. So it does look like the book, but it is updated in real time. And then NFPA Link kind of looks like this, and this is an annual subscription. It's pretty cheap. It's $115, access to all the codes and standards, and it gives you your own little, basically, your own little. You log into it. You're going to be able to put the standards you want to look at, and you can have bookmarks. If you see on the right here, I've got some bookmarks of some things, but you can access that. The other nice thing about NFPA Link here is that you can, when you get to it, and this is what the page, if you're looking at something, this is 855, you can highlight, you can cut it, you can paste it. Like I said, you can bookmark it, you can print it. You can't print the whole document at once, but you can print sections, and you can also share them electronically. So it's an easy way to navigate the standards. I'm really enjoying it. Had it about 2 years now. Fire Code Subscription Service, you may be familiar with this, seen this before. Just has a list of the standards. When you look at them, right, it basically, you can see that. I think I said it was a PDF. It's not. You can see it electronically that way and break down and kind of trying to see what you're looking for. Okay. So when you're looking at a standard, right, I'm not sure why that slide gets messed up a little bit. What are you looking at, right? So what are the actual requirements? How are they built? What do they mean? So first off, the NFPA has this manual of style. It's a very big document that kind of goes in what it should look like. The gist of it is that each of the requirements is one sentence, right? Must contain a shall and only one shall. You can't use vague and ambiguous words, and they even, in the manual style, they even have a list of like words you can't use, but you can't use vague and ambiguous words. And if you have explanatory material, right, suggestions or just history or something, it's going to go into Annex A. which is the explanatory annex, and you can have shoulds in there. So if it's not a requirement, if it's a should, it goes into the annex. Basically, here's what the document looks like in there. You'll pick the area you want. One thing that you want to look at in standards, and Neil talked about this in his presentation, was that in every document there's a origin and development of the standard. And if you can see on here, this goes back to the first edition, and it gives you a history, and it goes through each edition what the committee was looking at, what was happening in the fire service, and what changes were made. So the first edition in 1971 was adopted as a standard in 1975, and then it goes through each edition. It's very interesting reading. Something I want you to see here too is we talked about that annex material, explanatory. So if you see a requirement that's got an asterisk next to it, that's telling you that there's annex material. And if you click on that annex material, it's going to pop up and link. You can go to the back of the book if that's the way you're using it, and you'll see what it is. And it's either, again, it's explanatory material. In this case, here's what I'm showing you with has to do with firefighter PPE and reflectivity and roadway incidents, and explains the federal standard that you have to follow for that, but it's not part of the actual standard. Next piece is the process, right? So getting involved in the process, very daunting, very scary for folks generally. Here's what I'll say about it, and clearly I'm somebody who lives and breathes and loves the process, and I think you have to look at it, personally I feel you have to look at it that way, right? You got to live it, you got to love it, and you got to respect it, because it is a process. NFPA does follow it, so it's something if you master, we can be very good at, right? Getting what we want in the process, and you just have to persevere and stay with it. Thankfully, the other thing about the process is that there's still very much a human process. Right? AI hasn't taken this over yet. I hope it never does, but it's very much a human process. So the technical committee is the committee that basically it's a consensus body, right? Responsible for the development and revision of an NFPA standard. Generally there's about 30 members on a committee. There are some committees that have more than that. No more than 1/3 of the committee can be of the same interest category, and I'll show you what the interest categories are in a second. In order to take some action on an item, they need to have a consensus. That really means a majority, a simple majority on the committee to be able to take an action one way or another. NFPA membership is not required to be on a technical committee, so that's good to know. We do recommend you being on do have NFPA membership, because it allows you to participate fully through the process, and we'll explain some of that. But that's what Sean and Neil were talking about, us going to the NFPA annual meeting later on this year in June to speak regarding some of the NITMAMs or amending motions in the process. And often a technical committee is responsible for multiple standards, right? And the standard is like 1971. It's the actual, the requirements for a specific thing. 855 is the standard. And then a document, historically they were interchangeable standards and documents. So now we have, with the consolidation process, you have new documents that contain multiple standards in them. So now NFPA 1850 is care and maintenance, but it's care and maintenance for two different standards. For 1851, which is your protective ensemble, and 1852, which is your SCBA. So I'm on 4 technical committees. I'm on 2 committees for health and safety. I'm on the respiratory protection equipment committee. I've been on since like 2002. And then I'm on the correlating committee. So between those 2 committees, there's about, now with the consolidation, I oversee about a dozen documents that has about 35 different standards currently. So it's and I don't know them all perfectly, but I know the process, know how to find the information, and participate in it. And if I can do it, anybody can. These are the interest categories, right? So you have to be able to assign yourself to one of these. Most firefighters are going to fall under either a user. You could be sponsored by labor, and you do need a sponsoring agency. In some cases, you may be an enforcing authority, like in health and safety. If you're a safety officer, you can submit as an enforcing authority. So you'll see firefighters that represent multiple interest categories on a committee. But again, the rule is you can't have more than a third on a single category. So if you're applying to a committee, you probably want to look and see what interest category is underrepresented. And then, okay, so when I got on respiratory, there were quite a few users on there, but there was only one other labor position on there. And so I submitted as a labor spot, and I got moved up, and I had to get sponsored by my local, but I was able to move up ahead of people who had submitted as wanted to be on as users. So that's just something to know. And also, again, kind of understanding that there is a wide range of interests on these committees. When we're doing things right, when we're going through it, the NFPA process is a 4-step process. There's public input, public comment, the technical committee meeting, or the tech session, as sometimes it's called too, and then the Standards Council takes action. This is approximately a 2-year process, starting with the public input. So the public input opens up pretty soon after a standard is released, and from the public, you're able to go online and put a suggestion of what you want to see added to the standard or change within the standard. That's called the first draft, and development of the first draft. The committee will have a first draft meeting roughly about 2 years before the standard is going to be issued. They're going to consider and provide responses to all public input. They may use the input to develop what's called a first revision, so we don't have to necessarily, it's not an up or down. It could be that, oh, this is an interesting comment, and this is something that's being suggested, but we think it should go this way or that way, and the committee could develop something completely new. And they may also, members of the committee may bring new inputs not submitted as public input. So that's your last chance to get new material into the next edition. The committee gets balloted on their first draft, and then the first draft report, after that passes, the first draft report gets posted for the public to review. And the public has generally, I believe about 6 months, roughly 6 months to a year to provide comment back. In the public comment process, and here's the other thing I want to say about public input, and that is beware, right? Sitting on a committee, one thing that I'm always thinking about is trying to stay away from prescriptive requirements, right? And if you're submitting input or you're looking at the public input, you want to provide a comment on that, you want to think about, is this something that we can do? Does this apply to everybody? So take an issue that can be somewhat controversial, like clean cab or SCBAs out of the cab, right? Not many departments are keeping their SCBAs completely out of the cab, but there are folks who submitted public inputs that say, hey, SCBAs should be out of the cab. So that's a big, broad stroke, and saying, well, for me, I'll look at it and say, well, what problem are we trying to solve? Right? And I think with every public input, you want to say, what problem are you trying to solve? Is there more one way to do it? So we don't want to be restrictive, but we want to solve the problem. So in the case of SCBA out of the cab, right, there's a lot of different arguments. The current argument for it says that, hey, SCBA are contaminated. We don't want to be in contaminated equipment in the cab, right? But what if we just don't say you can't have SCBA in the cab? What if we say you can't have contaminated SCBA? What if you have clean SCBA? What if a department has a way to do either SCBA exchange on the scene, to do proper cleaning and decon, maybe exchange of soft goods on the scene, and do it some other way? Do they have to change out the way they do things? So again, not necessarily, I won't take a position necessarily for or against clean cab. There's a lot of good things, but it means different things to different places, and we should always be looking at, is this too prescriptive? Right? Let them solve the problem. Let a department figure out how to solve it. Because how FDNY solves a problem versus how, a small one-station department is going to solve a problem, they're probably going to be very different. In the public comment period, right, comments are accepted as the first draft material. The things that we did accept as first draft material are posted for the final draft, for the first draft report. At the second draft meeting, in that time, the public can make comment on the things that are posted, and they can consider providing a response to all, they have to provide a response to all these public inputs or public comments. And they may make additional revisions to the standard as well that weren't necessarily submitted by the public. The important thing is that at this stage, you cannot have new material. right? New material only happens in first draft. You can't add new requirements. Now, there is a lot of gray area in that. So if the issue has been brought up, right, if you tried to make a change in regarding something, saying about like something in a section, I think I have an example of it here, but you have a list of requirements that you put in, and we added some things, and now somebody says, hey, or nobody adds a new requirement. We can add maybe a new requirement in there, or somebody in the public submits a new requirement to add to that list. That would not be considered new material because it's adding to an existing requirement. The committee votes on that, like in the first draft, they get balloted on it, and then that second draft report gets posted. The public may review the second draft report to decide, whether to submit a notice of intent to make a motion or for further consideration. So if they don't agree with what we did, right, the committee made a decision and they're like, I'm still not happy with it, which isn't the case, currently with some of the requirements surrounding PFAS or different tests. Anybody can file a NIPMAM for further consideration, and that's going to go to the annual meeting. That annual meeting is called the tech session, right, where the NIPMAMs that are submitted properly are going to be accepted and are accepted. They're going to come before the floor. These are anybody who's a NFPA member who goes to the annual meeting, can't participate virtually, but you're there. You can participate in the debate, and it's going to get voted basically up or down. That doesn't necessarily mean that change is accepted. It does go back to the committee at that point, and then it'll eventually go back to the technical committee for further consideration as well. The last step is the Standards Council, right? So things that NIPMAMs that were at the tech session, they can be appealed to the Standards Council, really, regardless of whether they were passed up or down. They go to the Standards Council. You have to file this appeal within 20 days of the technical session, and then the Standards Council ultimately will decide whether to issue the standard or take other action. So they could push it back to the committee here again, or they could delay the standard, right? Bottom line, the Standards Council is the overseer and the issuer of all NFPA standards, right? So they're going to make the final decision on the process. And you can, if you appeal to the Standards Council, you can actually go to their meeting and you can speak directly on behalf of something if you feel the need to. Okay. Making inputs and comments. The way you do this is that doc info page that we talked about. That next edition, right down there in the middle, right? You'll click on that from the doc info page, and then if you can slide a different format, but if you scroll down on there, it'll show you your first draft report, and there's a button, a little red button, scrolling down on that. That will show you how you can submit a comment. So that's what it looks like there. One of those red buttons is going to say submit a public comment. When you hit that, you're going to see, you can see where the first revision says FR there on the little gray box. You can see what was submitted, but also you see that there is like legislative text, so you can see changes that were made. And then you're able to basically assess, well, is that something that I want to see or not? And if you're doing a first revision, if you're going to, or a second revision, a public comment to it, either first or second really, you're going to, it'll open up a screen and you can type directly there. It'll show you legislatively what was added. You just, basically you're going to click on a box and it'll open it up. And in this case, something important to note is that in second revision, you don't actually see the changes, right, that were made in the first revision. So this, I think, is a big shortfall of the system that NFPA has, is that you can look at the first draft and see the changes. If you're looking at second draft, it looks like the final document. So you don't, it's cleaner, but you don't see the legislative text anymore. So you have to review the changes made in the first draft report, and then you go into the public comment and you make changes or comments there of what you want to add. You make changes to it. When you submit it, it's going to show up in the document info page like that for you to see. This one I didn't submit, but I kind of showed you what it would look like if something's actually submitted. Okay, and then just getting involved, right? Anybody can get involved in this process, and I strongly encourage it. You can get involved at any level, right? You can provide public input, you can provide public comment, you can submit what's called a temporary interim amendment. This requires the support of at least 2 other committee members, but you can say, hey, this is a critical safety issue that we can't wait until the next edition, right? And so we have done this, we do this very often, really. It's not unusual in a cycle that once or twice a TIA, an amendment will be pushed out, gets balloted by the committee, and can change, and that'll change the document before the next edition is released. Join the committee. It's very easy to do that, or at least to submit an application. And you can also attend the meeting as a guest. And I've been on committees for over 20 years. We have a lot of respect for our guests. They come, we respect that they're showing up, they sit in the room. In some cases, if we have the space, we'll even let them sit at the table. And we'll let them participate in the process fully, right? They don't get to vote as a guest. We also have them participating in task groups. So if we have like a working group addressing a specific issue, whether it's like preliminary exposure reduction, if we have a subject matter expert that's not on the committee that wants to participate, or for that matter, run that committee or that task group, we'll put them in charge of it. They can actually run a task group as a guest, not a committee member, and allow them to participate fully in the process. They don't get a vote, right? The only way to get a vote is to be on the committee. Our voice is as loud as we want it to be. I feel, at least in my committees, we've been very successful. If you stand your ground, if you make a coherent argument, if you build consensus, if you're willing to build some bridges, right, and not have to stand completely on one position, but recognize that we got to find a way to make this work, which is often something the firefighters have to do. But if we can, as the fire service, if we can all get on the same page, we seem to be able to do anything. Again, limited exception with the example of the PFAS issue, which I feel strongly we're going to prevail on that coming up soon. Applying to the committee, very simple. Again, the doc info page. You go on that page, on the top portion of that, right there, by the document, it'll say apply to the committee. You click on that button, it puts you through an application process. You have to submit a few things. You need a letter of support from a sponsoring agency. But other than that, it's a pretty straightforward process. It takes a little while. It could take a few months because it's got to get first approved through Standards Administration that it's all right. Then it goes to the Standards Council if there's room on the committee. So if they decide that there's room on the committee for that interest group and they want to fill a vacancy, that it'll go to the Standards Council and you get approved pretty quick. But again, it could take you 3-4 months or more sometimes. And that is the gist of it.